Hello, it is July the 9th. We are live. It is The View from the Top, and I am so excited to see all of you in the audience, and I'm so excited for everything we've got on this show. We've got Thursday coming in from the Bay Area. Always good to see you, Thursday. We've got my old friend Steve Hoffman coming in from Boston, people coming in from all over the world. The numbers are picking up, and we are in for a good show today. And I'll tell you why it's going to be such a good show. First of all, I'm so excited. We have backstage Chris Kline, the author of Unpacking Employee Relocation. I've read the book. It is awesome. You'll want to read the book. And we're going to be talking to him, picking his brains on his years of experience and finding out why he wrote the book and what's in it and what we can all learn from it. It's going to be absolutely fascinating. So we've got a great show lined up. We've also got my colleague Nitzan Udan, who's going to be just teasing us a little bit about a big reveal that is coming shortly from Benevo. And of course, we've got Julia Onslow-Cole backstage to give us our immigration update. What about next week? Well, next week, we're going to be talking about global mobility at LSEG, the London Stock Exchange Group. One platform, real impact. It is absolutely fascinating what they've done. And if you like to find out all about what other companies are doing, and in particular, you like to find out how companies can use technology, and dare I say it, Benevo technology, to really make a difference, this will be the show for you. Now, of course, many of you do want to get your CPE codes, and we've got CPE codes for you. We've got CPE codes from ERC, from SHRM, from HRCI. So many thanks. I saw my old friend Mark Birchall's in the audience from ERC. Many thanks to ERC for supporting us, and those are the codes there for GMS and CRP, and also to our good friends at Rocket Mortgage who've given us the codes for HRCI and SHRM. So that's that. We're now going to move on straight away, and we're going to be bringing onto stage right up front my friend and colleague Nitzan Udan, who's going to be telling us just a little bit about what is coming down the turnpike. And trust me, if you like technology, if you're interested in, you're fascinated by the future, you're going to be really interested in what Nitzan is going to be sharing this week and over the next few weeks. So without further ado, you know how it works. Everybody hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's welcome onto our stage Nitzan Udan. Hey Nitzan, how you doing?
Thank you, Brian, for the warm welcome. Good to see everyone. Very excited to be here.
Okay, so tell us what's coming down the turnpike.
All right, so I've been losing sleep on that, and I've been losing sleep.
We don't want you losing sleep, Nitzan.
No, because I'm so excited. This is such a big thing that we are about to announce, and yes, also losing sleep because at night we are making some progress that we don't do sometimes over the day. But the technology jump that we are about to announce and reveal in just 2 weeks' time is just phenomenal. This is the biggest announcement of the year in our industry. It's a shift. It's a paradigm shift. It's going to change how every person in mobility is doing their work. And
wow. So, okay, let's just unpack that a bit. So this is going to change the way that everybody in mobility views their work, and the reveal is going to be in 2 weeks' time.
Exactly.
So I know you're not going to give the game away, and that's the whole secret of a reveal. We have to build it up. We do the tease, etc. We all know how the game works, but tease us a bit. Tell us a bit about what can we say now. Give us a clue as to what's coming.
So I'll start with why. Why are we so excited about this, and why do we even invest in that? And what we've seen in the last 3 months, 2 to 3 months, is a shift, a mega shift on the focus of leadership, executive leadership, C-level in large corporate about the importance of using AI. Now, when I say to my team, they don't understand because I've been, as the CEO, talking about using an AI for 2.5 years. But now this happening at the largest organization, the largest bank, and the focus on being able to demonstrate, as one of our clients tell us, I need to report how many times a day I used AI. Another one said, I need to demonstrate how much time have I saved and how can I avoid anything from hiring to backfilling by using AI. And in reality, that pressure comes as a challenge for mobility. We just had Julia Onslow Cole share a very interesting insight on the green room. She gave me the permission to quote that where she brought it from in a conference yesterday. She heard that generally HR is the lowest adopter of AI across all organizations. That's a research, I believe, by McKinsey. Um,
That is shocking. I'm sure it's not anybody who tunes into this show, but but clearly there is an issue at the very minimum with the perception of HR's adoption of technology by the C-suite, because that's where McKinsey is getting it from.
Exactly. And in mobility, it's not different. Maybe even worse, maybe even harder. And what we've been hearing from Karen Hale last week and from Microsoft and from others, that mobility really needs to lean on their vendors and on their suppliers in order to get the solutions. And that's why we took that role, we took the responsibility, and we said, okay, what if we could make mobility no more be the least of adoption, but actually the top? And we've already ran a few workshops with the changemaker communities. First, some data that came from that: 75% of the changemakers are seeing the need. The pressure increased from the C-level in the last 2 to 3 months to use AI more. That's massive, right? The other 25%, 20% of them are saying it's the same as it was before. It was already high, and only 5% saying it's not a priority to my organization. So it's everywhere we see that. And when we showed them a sneak peek into MI, we've seen them, they were ranking before. How good do you think you are at using AI? And they put themselves in the organization at probably 2 out of 5, and then more than double that score after they've seen those set of reveal. So very, very excited about that. Let me, and give a few examples maybe to bring it to life. Like one of the change makers shared with us a challenge they had on using AI. They said, I tried to use Copilot in order to find what are the requirements in the Philippines, but it gave me the wrong answer. And that's something we hear a lot, right? We try to use AI, but we get the wrong answer. But the problem is not with the technology or the person. It's about how we use that technology.
And that's what we need to learn. We need to learn how to do the prompt engineering, how to use the technology.
Yes, but we took a different approach. We said mobility people at Benevo, we believe should be mobility experts, not IT experts, not AI experts. So we built technology that doesn't require to be an AI expert, that you can use the knowledge that you have today. Everyone on this call and their children and their parents can use that, right? Without knowing prompt engineering, because we've built the prompt engineering into the technology. So it runs in the background, and it's expert in mobility. We call it, and I'll give the name, we call it MI. When mobility meets AI, that's what we get. And that's
so you pull mobility and AI together and you get MI. Okay, so MI is coming in just a couple of weeks. This is going to change the mobility world.
And it's going to touch everything, right? It's going to touch from policy brief that we give to the employees, to how we engage with the HRBP, to how questions, right? One of the biggest challenges we keep hearing from mobility, that they need to answer lots of questions. This is going to disappear. We're going to eliminate the questions that come and now asking me, can I do that? Is my policy allowing that? This is all going to disappear. We're talking about be able to run assessments, risk analysis in real time, being able to understand immigration rules, being able to tax, to get any data that I want. If leadership is asking me, hey, Nitzan, can you justify mobility? I can do that with an MI now in a few minutes. So this will, some of the things we are very excited. All of this technology is built in order to allow mobility, to excel in being mobility, to be humans, to be able to provide the human touch and the strategic value and be able to demonstrate their value to their leadership. So as you can see, I'm very excited about that. People at Benivo are excited. The change makers, I want to say thank you to everyone who helped us, who gave us advice and share us their pain points and share with us feedback, how to iterate. It's been a phenomenal journey, and really looking forward to sharing more in just 2 weeks.
Okay, so there's the tease, and I was on some of those changemaker calls the other day, and I've heard the excitement about this. So if you like AI and you like mobility, you are going to love MI. So everybody, mark your diaries. It's 2 weeks' time. Big reveal. It is the event for global mobility professionals in terms of the technology development of the year, or indeed of the last few years. So very exciting. Nitzan, we're going to say thank you so much for being on show, and we are just so excited about hearing all your news. We're now going to move on to other breaking news, which is our standard breaking news. So we're going to run the video of everyone who's got a new job or promotions, etc., or job opportunities out there. So everybody, big thank you to Nitzan. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's check out our breaking news as well. So there we have it. Lots of people have got new jobs, lots of promotions. Big shout out, of course, to a long-standing friend of the show, Rob Zeitz. We wish you all the best in your new role at Forrester. Big shout out to to everybody there, but especially I want to give a special mention to Meredith Morris and Laurie Ryan, who both joined Benivo in the last week or so to work on our business development team out in the USA. So great to have you guys on board. Congratulations. Everyone's got a new job. Who's been promoted. And of course, if you are looking for a role, and I know quite a lot of people are looking for roles at the moment, then there are jobs out there, and we publicize those, and we wish you all the best with those job searches. If you've got a bit of news you want to share with us, maybe you've been promoted or you've got a new job, or indeed you've got a job opening that needs to be filled, then let us know and we'll do whatever we can to publicize it. We're now going to move on, and we're going to move on from breaking news and technology to immigration. And as ever, we have backstage the wonderful Julia Onslow Cole. So everybody, you know how it works. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's welcome onto our stage Julia Onslow Cole.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Yes, good. Brian wanted to know whether I'd use the setting where I touch myself up, but obviously I haven't, unfortunately, today.
Just so the audience knows that we had and those who were here last week will know we had a terrible problem with people, or mainly me, being kicked out of the studio, and we're told by our streaming platform that was when we were using certain functions, including virtual backgrounds and touching up. So we're going the simple route today until our streaming platform, bless them, get their act together and sort out what's going on with their streaming.
Anyway, everything's good. Yeah.
Touch wood, everything is good at the moment. So Julia, give us an update. Tell us what are you going to talk to us about today?
Yes, so I'm really wanting to talk to you about UK immigration, because there's an enormous deadline of the 22nd of July that's coming up, and everyone really needs to know about this. And I just want to say a big shout out to Louise Haycock, who's a partner at Fragman in the London office, and she has really so kindly given me a lot of the inside information on this, and she in fact is leading a Fragman webinar on this on the 15th of July. But what's happened is that the government issued a white paper. They issued that a little while ago. The white paper is basically, it's a thought about what the government might do in the rest of its term, and that's under consultation. But what they also issued in the last few days was a statement of changes of immigration rules. And these are actually going to take effect. And the key date is the 22nd of July. Now, in this paper, what they're saying is that they're going to increase the skills level of people who will qualify to be sponsored. So at the moment, it's a RFQ3, which is about school leaver level. And it's going to be pulled right up to RFQ6, which is degree level. So those people out there, those employers who have school leavers and they're sponsoring them, this is really important that you understand these changes. It will not affect those people who are already in your workplace. So for anyone that's already in your workplace, they're fine, they can stay, you can extend their immigration leave. Obviously, if you're thinking of employing someone at that lower level, you need to do it right away and before the 22nd of July. What you have to do is
a short timescale, very, very short.
Very short. And obviously the government know that, and they've done that to stop a sort of fire sale. But what you can do is you can issue a certificate of sponsorship, and if they're out of the country, then you have to apply for a defined certificate of sponsorship. And this out of country application normally only takes, a couple of days at most, but we think there's going to be a delay because we think that lots of people will apply. The other thing the government have done, so they've reduced, they've increased the level, the level that of education that you need to have to be sponsored, but also they've increased the salary levels by quite a lot. It's 8%. So there's two salary levels. There's one, a general salary level that you have to meet, but also the going rate for the job. So, for example, a software development engineer, that has been increased to 58,000 a year. So there's the general, which is going to be 41,700, but then you have to meet the individual one for that role. And then what's going to happen to people that you really want to sponsor and you really need to, but they're not going to qualify because of the fact that they're not at degree level? Well, government has introduced an interim temporary shortage list, and there's 52 occupations on that list, and these are from school leaver up to HND, and they're saying this is a temporary list, but if you have individuals on that list, you can apply for them, but this is the big catch: they can't bring their dependents. Now, as you know, I'm on the board of the Permits Foundation, and the Permits Foundation are very concerned about this because this is an increasing narrowing of the rights of people to bring dependents. So first of all, you saw it with some students, you saw it with people who are doing jobs in social care, and now the government is saying, okay, if they can't meet this level of education, they might be on the temporary shortage list, but they can't bring their families. So this is quite a major step. And then at the end of 2000,
that presumably is deliberate to just go. Yeah.
And the end of 2026, all roles will be off the list unless the Migration Advisory Committee say they should stay. So this week, the Home Office announced the Migration Advisory Committee, which is this advisory body. They will look at the salary levels and they will look who should be on the temporary shortage list. And the key to this is the link between that list and the recently announced UK industrial strategy. So that was the industrial strategy, is something that has been announced. It's very sector specific, and it's looking long term, saying these are the sectors that the UK need to really grow, and then looking right back, do we have those skills? How can we educate people? And this is all part of the industrial strategy. So if you are now a global mobility leader and you're watching in, and I hope that you're watching in, and I hope this is really helpful for you. But it's really, really important that you look now at your UK population. And if you have anyone that would now not meet the requirements for maybe the salary requirements, or maybe their job isn't, their experience isn't senior enough, you should apply before the 22nd of July. And as Brian said, you don't have much time.
You've really got to get your skates on, haven't you?
Yes. And then also in the short to mid-term, you need to really analyze your workforce, and you'll need to say, really, how is this going to affect you going forward? And then the big takeaway is your voice matters. Your voice really matters. One thing the government in the UK have always been wonderful at is stakeholder engagement, and they really want to hear from business. So don't think that your voice doesn't matter, and please do respond to the Max consultation.
Okay, so Julia, thank you so much for that update. Really, really appreciate it. We're now going to move on. I'm so excited. We have backstage Chris Kline, the author of Unpacking Employee Relocation. So everybody, you know how it works. Let's thank Julia and welcome Chris to our stage in the time-honored fashion of hitting the heart button, hitting the like button, and hitting the applause button. My friend, Chris, great to have you on the show. I'm so excited to see you there.
Good to see you, Brian. Thanks for inviting me.
And we've got something in common. I can see behind you there, behind your chair, that book, Unpacking Employee Relocation. And I have my copy here, and I recommend this book to everybody out there. But let's just start talking about that. So there's the book. But Chris, I got to start off with, what inspired you to write a book about employee relocation? Where did all that come from?
I've been in the mobility space for 4 decades now, and I've had the opportunity to do a lot of presentations, work with a lot of corporate clients, and really had a lot of experiences in working with programs. And you've been to enough industry events, you're around the bar. Normally the stories start coming out about, oh, did you hear this one about this expat, or did you hear this about this mover, whatever it may be.
That's the best part of any conference, isn't it?
Exactly right. So when I
first wine afterwards, or the coffee in the day, yeah.
And I first started looking at the idea of writing a book, and I thought it would be around those experiences. And then when I dug into it and I really got started, I began with the case studies. And then when I got into the case studies, I thought, you know what, I need to look at this more use it as a training opportunity, communication opportunity for the industry. Started some research, looked to see if there was anything out there that had been published before specific to employee relocation that didn't exist. So I decided I'm going to go ahead and do this, and I'm going to get started. And now we have a book.
Okay, so this book was 35 years or so in the making. You know, obviously you've been gaining expertise over the years, and multitude of people effectively giving their experience through you, through, you know, all the conversations you've had over those 35 years, building to your knowledge bank, your wealth of. But so it was 35 years in the making. But how long did it actually take to write? Tell us about the creative process.
I thought about writing the book for over probably a 2-year period. At the time, it wasn't top of mind. And then towards the end of last year, I started thinking more seriously about it. And I made the decision I'm going to go ahead and do it. So I went through the holidays, got to the day after Christmas, and I spoke to my wife and I said, I'm going to write the book. And she said, well, just do it. She goes, well, when do you think it's going to be done? I said, I think I want to have it done by the time I go back to work on the 2nd. She goes, so you're going to write an entire book between the 26th and the 2nd? I said, yeah.
Okay, so we're talking in a week.
In a week. So
I said, I had the pleasure of meeting Chris at FEM in Dallas. Incredible insights and an even better person. Well, I will definitely second both of those. So you wrote the book in a week, but you were telling me earlier that was the easy bit, was writing the book. It was the editing afterwards and the redraft. So tell us a bit about that process.
The book was written as a story. So it was really just like having a conversation. It was not in any kind of a format that would be a book that you would be proud of to publish. So then I started to engage with an editor, and the editor took what was essentially 175 words, and at the end became just under 300. But help me restructure, help me read.
175,000 words.
It's 299 words right now. It's just under 300 words. Yeah. So the original manuscript was 175, and it was more about, you know, these stories are great, but, you know, think about reformatting. So it took about 3.5 months then to do the complete rewrite. So every day there could be a paragraph, there could be a page, could be a case study, could be other attachments. So we went through the creative rewrite process.
Okay. What I really like about the book is that apart from the main text, you've got, after each chapter, there's a bit which says the key takeaways, the key learnings from that chapter. And you have checklists and you have case studies. I mean, there's so much really useful stuff in there. It's a very user-friendly book.
Again, my entire career has been in business development. So I've been in so many conference rooms with corporate customers trying to not just educate them on the processes, but also arm them with the tools so they can then go to the C-level and get the approvals of what they were looking for. So the book was really a series of presentations. I personally have moved 14 times throughout my life. So not only have I been involved in working with corporate clients, but I've gone through the experience in every stage of my career as well.
Okay. And tell us about the title. I mean, why is it called Unpacking Employee Relocation? Where's the unpacking coming from?
It was actually the editor's suggestion. At first we started thinking about relocation is like a puzzle, and you're trying to put these pieces together to get the perfect mobility program. But puzzle's been used way too much, right? When you start looking at how many times it's been used. And she made the suggestion. She said, you know, this is a very complex process, and it really is about unpacking these concepts, this knowledge, this information, and putting it together to help design a program. So that's where
Okay, and I quite like that. There's a bit of a play there, isn't there? Because obviously, you know, as an industry, we're pretty much in the packing industry. Well, I suppose you pack and then you unpack as you do the move. But obviously, we also use unpacking as a phrase to sort of analyze and looking at. I mean, it's a great book. And if I did want to buy it I'll put it up here again. If I did want to get my copy on Amazon, how much would that set me back?
It's now
dollar terms.
In US dollars, $9.99.
It's a bargain. I mean, that's less than about 5 minutes of somebody's consulting time. And you've got 35 years worth of experience there. So, I mean, all kudos to you for doing this. Out in the audience, if you've got questions for Chris as we go through, then let us know, and we'll try and get to some of your questions as well. But meanwhile, I'm going to sort of be selfish, and I'm going to take the lead on the questions. So one of the things you say in the book, I mean, I think it's in the first chapter. You say, and I've got it here, the quote. You say, RMCs provide structure, but also introduce challenges. While they streamline relocation, hidden fees and opaque billing structures require greater transparency and oversight. I mean, that's quite a big statement there. So, you know, we're not scared of anybody on this show. So let's get into this a bit. Let's just have a discussion. What do you mean when you say RMCs provide structure, but also introduce challenges? What are you getting at there?
I think the first thing to say is that there's a lot of different types of relocation management companies that are out there. But in general, a relocation management company is someone that you've employed you've outsourced your mobility program to them. And what I've seen throughout my career, both as an RMC and as a consultant, is companies have a tendency to just outsource everything to the RMC and they lose complete control. Not only is it bad for their company, it's bad for their transferees, but it's also bad for the RMCs because there's really no way to evaluate what is happening there. If you engage with an RMC to do all of your supplier management, do all of your selection, all of your negotiations, they get paid. They need to get paid for that. They need to get compensated for that. Is the value of what they're providing worth the compensation that they're receiving? That's the first question a mobility manager needs to answer. And if the answer is no, they need to take a deeper dive into what their program is and how it's structured.
I mean, that raises an interesting question. I think it's not something we talk about very much, but conflicts of interest. I mean, there are quite often conflicts of interest. And I wonder, for those of you who are global mobility program leaders, how much you understand about what the potential conflicts of interest might be further down, with your vendors. So Chris, just talk us through, and you touched on it earlier, you said there's different types of RMCs, so maybe we need to unpack that too. But what are the conflicts of interest that you think are out there?
When I first got into the industry, I got into the industry in 87. And up to that point, the biggest piece of legislation facing the domestic U.S. market was the favorable tax ruling in 1972 for tax protected home sale programs. Not a whole lot after that. Then you had the deregulation of transportation in the U.S., which started to allow movers to be able to discount on their U.S. based tariffs. And what I just talked about is really essentially a 30-year period. Now you look at the last decade and the changes, you look at the lawsuits associated with the National Association of Realtors, you look at the complete elimination of domestic price guides or tariffs when it comes to household goods, you look at the elimination of the tax benefits associated with many of the policies with the tax changes in 2017. And then now the advent of the technology that's coming into play. I've never seen so much change that's happening within our industry. So with that change, you now start having to look at, well, your RMC, who are they? Who are they owned by? Who do they own? How do they make their decisions? Are there conflicts of interest? I will tell you that there are completely independent RMCs that are out there. They don't own anybody and they're not owned by anybody. But there are companies that are very strategic.
So let me just step in there, because some RMCs are independent. Some might be part of a real estate group. Some might be part of a van line group. That's the sort of thing you're talking about. Some right. Own their own supply chain and some are independent of their own supply chain.
I had one colleague with a very large RMC one time tell me when I started asking them to explain their pricing methodology. And the quote was, you're not going to go into Walmart and ask what they paid for the cost of that item on the shelf. You can't ask us that either.
Okay. But also, I mean, you said that some of it is quite opaque as well. So tell us a bit about what you mean by that, about the whole process being a little bit opaque.
So there's methodologies out there where the contracts between the client and the RMC just allows for pass-through cost. There's no recognition is there a markup? Is there a referral fee? How are those costs being negotiated? What are the terms of those costs that are being negotiated? It's really opaque. And when you think about it, unfortunately for the RMCs, the percentage of revenue that they get is very low when you think about the total spend. But when you start looking at things like household goods, real estate, immigration, all the components that go along with it, these are very expensive line items. So it's very important. How are you buying those services? Who are you working with? What are the relationships between the RMC and the suppliers? And most importantly is what's the competitive nature of that marketplace?
So where do you think the market's going? I mean, you said there's, RMCs are not necessarily making the margins they'd want to, and it's getting harder for them you mentioned home sale and there's various other things going on. What do you think? Do you see consolidation happening in the market? Do you see insolvencies? Where do you think the market's going?
I had the opportunity to do a corporate roundtable a couple of weeks ago in New York, and one of the big topics came up, the whole conversation around referral fees, pricing structures. And the person asked me point blank, well, if you could change it, what would it look like? And my answer was, I would do away with this referral fee based model or hidden revenue based model because not only is it unfair to the client, the transferee, I believe it's unfair to the RMC as well, because too many times they provide a pricing proposal on 500 assignments. It ends up being 200 assignments. They're supposed to have, 150 moves. They end up doing 50 moves. They're not able to make their money, and nobody's really happy with that situation. So I'd love to see the industry, and I think that the industry is already starting to move to more of a transactional based model. I'm going to handle this policy. I'm going to provide these services. This is my charge per file. And then the client gets the credit or the recognition from any referral revenue, because there is referral revenue that's out there that is justifiable, but it still needs to be recognized, and it has to go into the total cost equation.
So you would change the financial model and try and get away from some of the hidden markups, because you're feeling they erode the value of the program and they erode the transparency of our industry?
Well, one of the reasons for writing the book as well, and I think one of the motivations is over the last 3 years, I've had so many conversations with corporate customers. We're cutting our benefits, or we're going to go to a lump sum because we can give the employee a lump sum and just cut the lump sum. It makes it really easy to manage it from a cost standpoint. And then you start asking questions. Well, do you even know what you spend today, or how you're spending your money and who you're spending your money with? So that really started there's ways to save money. There's ways to improve quality without just cutting your budget. In fact, in many cases, you're going to be able to eliminate just ridiculous costs from your program or unused benefits by transforming your program.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, actually, the case study we've got on the show next week is a company that is using technology to integrate all its different supply chain partners. And I think that does lead again to a lot of transparency and indeed added program value, but more on that next week. One area you also talk upon, and in fact, I've got another quote from your book. You're talking about cost estimates, and you say cost estimates are crucial for budgeting and fairness. Now, I find that fascinating because I think we all know that cost estimates are crucial for budgeting. Maybe people don't do them as much as they should, but we'll get onto that. But you said it's for budgeting and fairness. What do you mean by fairness?
I saw somebody who was signed up, was a client that I had the opportunity to work with, who had a budget of, we'll just call it 5 million euros associated with their program. At the end of the year, it was normally around 15 million euros. So the gap between what they thought they were going to spend and what they spent was absolutely enormous. I also worked with a large global client that used to move thousands of people per year, and they had no way of budgeting. It all went into all the invoices went into a central fund, and then it was distributed amongst the HR community and the different business units. They went to a model where they said, we're going to begin doing budgets on every one of these relocations. The business unit is going to authorize that benefit package and that amount of money, and it's going to be charged directly to the business unit. They went from doing roughly 10,000 US relocations a year to 3,000 in 3 years. And the reason being is that visibility went to the local hiring businesses. And they said, do we really want to spend this to get this person there? Or can we look at local talent that we currently, this particular customer did a lot of project work. They would be relocating somebody in, and they'd have an engineer who was coming off the project 2 months later. Why not just keep the person? So those are the kind of decisions. From a fairness perspective, is clients that do maybe a lump sum or a managed cap that is just a set dollar amount, it does not take into consideration distance, family size, individual family needs, and it's kind of an averaging, one size fits all. That's extremely dangerous for the employee and extremely dangerous for the company, because if I'm a family of 4 moving from Tampa, Florida, where I live now, to London, that's going to be a completely different cost than somebody moving from Atlanta to Dallas, a single renter with all the benefits. So that's where the cost estimating comes in, more of a needs-based model when it comes to either a managed cap or a lump sum.
Yeah, absolutely. I must say that with the Benevo technology, people can do unlimited cost estimates and indeed unlimited what ifs and compare them to actuals as well. And I think that's the sort of stuff that we need. I mean, for many, many years, the way you got a cost estimate done was you sent it off to your RMC or your tax provider or something, and it came back 48 hours later if you were lucky, and it cost a couple $100 a time to do it. And it was a real disincentive to do it, because you might do one, but you wouldn't necessarily do several. Because it's just, the costs were just racking up. And again, it's a case of where technology has moved things on. I've got a question for you. I want to go to a very specific question that's come in from a good friend of the show, Richard Majewski in West London. And he arrived late and he said this. He said, I just heard added value and varying RMC models. So he's catching up with the conversation. Hi out there, Richard. And he says, I'm currently obsessed with question whether there is an increased tendency for RMCs to book service departments directly rather than via specialist booking agencies. I know it's a little bit off topic, but you've got your ears close to the ground. What are you seeing in the US, Chris? Are you seeing a tendency for companies to try or for RMCs to book their service apartments directly rather than via booking agents?
I think we have a lot of blurred lines right now in our space. I think we have destination service providers that are really functioning now as RMCs. I think we have RMCs that are working as corporate apartment providers. And I think the lines are really getting blurred. I think it's more from an opportunistic standpoint. I think what some RMCs will do is they'll look at an employee and the employee needs a 6-month stay or an annual stay. That's a perfect opportunity for them to go get the lease, set up the utilities in their name, rent the furniture. But here's the frightening part. But instead of passing those savings on to the client of an annual lease, they're still going to bill it as if it's a 30-day stay. Yeah. So that's where, again, where it's blurred.
Oh, you're talking about the long-term rental there, but I think Richard was also referring to the short-term, the 30 days or something. Are you seeing any trends around that about whether people approach the service accommodation providers directly or whether they go through booking agents for that sort of stuff?
Not from a pure RMC, because there's just so much risk with taking a short-term rental. Is it your property? Do you have access? Also in the US, trying to get a lease for 30 days is very problematic, or it's going to be very expensive. So in that case, I would definitely reach out to the supply chain to manage that.
Okay, that's interesting. So let's move on. I mean, I want to go back to this question of referral fees. And you talked about referral fees and supply chain transparency. What should, let's reach out to the mobility managers. What should they know? What should they be looking at? How should a mobility manager approach this whole question themselves?
I was on a conference call and there was a corporate customer on there, and we got on this topic, and I talked about how there's real money here, there's real opportunity here from a cost management standpoint. And he said, you know what, I give it to my RMC, and if they make 5% on it, that's worth so much value. I can just give it to them. I'm not in the contracting process. I'm not paying the invoice. I don't deal with it. It's really great. And then my response to him is, okay, at what cost is it really great? Is it great at 5%? Right. So if you spend 100, like I had a client that spent 300 million a year. So 5% on 300 million, is that an okay number? Right. Is that really okay? Of course not. Right.
Absolutely.
Is 10% okay? Is 25% okay? Is 50% okay? Right. And that's where the customer is going to start having a different tolerance. Right. They're going to be less acceptable. But the main answer to that question is, what are you getting charged for today? What do the referral models look like? The other thing that we're really focusing on, at least what I'm focusing on right now with corporate clients, is keep in mind that those referral fees and those markups are being tax grossed up. So as an example, here in the US, if there's a 10% markup on a $10,000 move, that's $1,000. It's not just $1,000. There's an additional $600 to gross up. That's a $1,600 markup. So those are the types of data points you have to look at and say, what am I paying for? And then I should be able to negotiate what I'm paying for.
Yeah. So the point is that people could get things for less if there weren't the markups on them. I suppose it's a statement of the obvious, but absolutely. And that then returns to a gross up. Okay. So look, Benevo is a tech company, and we've got very firm views, obviously, ourselves on where tech is going. But I know you've got very firm views. So, you're independent. You've been around the industry a long time. You've clearly put a huge amount of thought in this. How do you think technology is transforming mobility? And I suppose, why do mobility managers, to put it bluntly, need to get with the program?
I think the first part is just the employee experience, the assignee experience. For any of us who's been in the space for a while, we know about this completing form fatigue, right? Giving out information over and over again. How many times do you have to tell a supplier how many children you have, or what their date of births are, or any of that kind of information? So from a data
social security number, all that sort of stuff.
exactly. Right. So from a data collection standpoint, isn't it great to just go through one onboarding wizard, provide the necessary information, and then have the application send that out? So that to me is very basic. And that's, again, anybody who uses travel apps, airline apps, they already have all your information. The credit card, you can order, you can set up your trip, works really well. Relocation I believe is going in a very similar way. But it also helps just with the experience. I started off working for a moving company, and we had an origin coordinator who would call the shipper a couple weeks out and have a guy, hey, are we still on to pack on the 15th and load on the 16th? These are the services you have in play. What does that look like? I moved locally in January, and I never heard from an origin coordinator. I actually got text on my phone. We have you set up on the 16th. We show that these are the services you're going to deploy. Have you thought about these different items? Have you gotten to your packing? Do you need help with packing? What about these items? And then it was the technology that followed up with me, and I just answered through the application. It was fantastic. From a mobility perspective, and we talked a little bit about this before the show, about the impact and what AI impact is going to be on the global mobility space, specifically the program managers. If your day today is spent as a mobility manager on transactions, filling out forms, updating people, you probably will be replaced by some sort of AI at some point. If you're strategic and you're looking how to get the best value for the corporation, for the employee, for the supplier partners, all of that, you've got a future, because AI is not in a position to replace that today. So I think it's going to be fantastic. I think some of the things that I'm seeing out there, from avatars as being your host agent at location to walk you through a city and share with you the different components, the access to curated data through some of these models I can remember, and Brian, you probably can too, is you sent out a community guide in paper. Even before email, you sent them a community guide, and it was very expensive, and it was a thick package that would tell them about banking and schools and all that information. That information is now online, and it's available through an app, and in some cases you actually have an avatar that's walking you through it.
Absolutely. And we've got our reveal coming in a couple of weeks, and there is some really cool AI technology that is coming out. And certainly some of the stuff that you're saying there is just music to our ears. One of the things that has always upset me, I think I've been banging on about this for years, is the fact that we always get better technology in our everyday lives than we do in our corporate lives. And I know I've said many a time, why do we get better technology when we're ordering a pizza than when we're managing a relocation? And the example I'd say is that if I order a pizza, I don't have to put my address in, because most of the time it knows my address, either because I've ordered from there before or simply because it knows where I am. I don't even have to put in my credit card details, because it knows that, or I'm using Apple Pay or whatever. So I'm using much better technology. And the idea that the same people who are doing that when they're ordering their pizza then have to put in their social security number or their date of birth 5 or 6 times for their immigration provider and their tax provider and their reload provider and their housing provider and this and that, it's crazy. And in fact, the case study we're showing next week will involve a company who has integrated absolutely everything, their immigration, their reload, their tax. I think you'll find it out in the audience. I think you'll find it fascinating. But so in a way, that brings me on to the next point. You make a comment in your book about there being a misalignment between mobility and mobility brands and the actual brand of the company that people actually work for themselves. So tell us a bit about what you mean by a mobility brand, and then the corporate, the overriding corporate brand of the company that people work for. And that misalignment.
I'll use large global corporations. They spend billions of dollars every year on their brand marketing. What does the brand represent? What is the brand promise? And it carries through everything that they do. Well-run organizations take that brand management and they take it to their employees as well. So it's their benefits, their rewards, their onboarding experiences all go to that brand promise. What I see with a lot of clients is they don't carry it all the way through to relocation. It's just this, again, it's not going to touch 100% of your employees. Maybe it touches 1 or 2% of your employees. So it has an opportunity to be kind of on its own little island, and that brand doesn't carry forward. The other part of that brand promise is most people joining an organization will be dealing with a recruiter, and those conversations around mobility are normally an afterthought. So what happens is you accept the position, you have a summary of what your benefits may be, and then you go to actually execute your relocation and you find out that it's completely different. That's a classic example of brand misalignment.
Okay. Let's. Oh, I'm getting a bit of echo there. Let's move on a bit. I want to understand about how you should strike the balance. I mean, about global versus local sourcing. So companies have got different sorts of ways of running their supply chain. What's your view on global versus local sourcing?
I think you start off with the easy wins. I think if you look at all of again, if it's a very complex global program, the idea that you're going to source in every corner of the world where you're going to have employees is probably not practical. So I think it's more of an approach of what are the services that are being purchased today and how can those be purchased on a global basis? And then you start to silo those purchases into a manageable way. One of the easiest for me is global household goods. I mean, it is, you're going to deal with a multitude of movers. Many corporations will go to a regional approach, right? They're going to say, okay, in the Americas, this is what we're going to do. In Asia, we're going to do this. In EMEA, we may take another approach. And also it's because it's such an enormous spend. Then maybe you take a look at assignments, destination services. Maybe you take a look at immigration and you try to get those partners in place. Then you look for opportunities of, does it make sense for us to break some of these things out local? Some of it you're forced to do because your provider that you may deal with on a global basis doesn't work in that particular corner of the world, right? They maybe, I dealt with one last week where the client does not have boots on the ground in China. They're looking to expand. They have a provider that is not equipped to handle China. They're going to need a separate provider. They're going to need a separate approach for that. So I think it comes down to what's important. What is mission critical, though, is regardless of whether you're under a global umbrella of suppliers or whatever it may be, is having the support of local HR. Because again, that disconnect with the brand, you may have somebody in Europe and say, hey, this is our brand. This is what we do from a mobility standpoint.
Yeah.
Look at the US and that person sitting in the US, that employer is saying, this will not work in the United States. I will not be able to attract talent using this, right? And we know, Europe will be off for the entire month of August. We'll be working here in the US. So, again, you look at the different policy and approaches.
Yeah.
Real estate is very utilized here in the United States, and it's a benefit that many companies will address. It's very rare to have that in Europe.
Okay, so let's just go back to RMCs, because there's different ways of using people. You can sort of in-source everything, you can outsource, you go for a hybrid approach. I know you talk about it in the book. Tell us a bit about the benefits of each and what your preference is, what you think the answer should be. But tell us a bit about, what the three models are and where it's going.
In theory, the full outsource model seems to be the ideal concept. It's utopia. It's the easy button. I can just give it to a relocation management company and they can worry about everything, and it's out of my preview, and I don't need to worry.
You lose control.
Well, you absolutely lose control of it. You lose control of cost. You lose control of employee experience. You absolutely, and again, I don't want a bunch of all RMCs into this group. There are RMCs that do a really good job in the next topic, and that is you outsource to an RMC whose brand is being replicated on each assignment or every relocation. If it's certain RMCs, it's going to be their brand. It's not the corporate brand, right? So it's going to be, I'm with ABC Relo, and this is how we do it, regardless of who the customer is. There's other relocation management companies that are out there that do a very good job of understanding the client and looking to emulate what that brand means and communicating that through the entire process. That's on paper of what it looks like. But then you look at it and you say, but you're spending a whole lot of money and you're also completely reliant on somebody else doing this work for you. And is that going to hit the goals, targets that you want to? So then the third option is, well, we'll just bring it all in-house and do it ourselves. Very few companies that I've ever seen globally has the ability to do this themselves in-house. There are companies that do it. They do it well, but they have a different type of program. They have a different type of policy. So then you start looking at it and say, well,
they have huge headcount to do that.
Well, they have to have the additional
headcount, isn't it? Yeah.
You've got to have a very active procurement department that helps you negotiate these global contracts, because that's a big part of this is multiple global contracts. So then you look at it and say, well, okay, well, what is the best fit? Well, to me, it's the hybrid or it's the co-source model. And that is where the client puts themselves in control and first of all determines, am I working with an RMC that is going to be supplier neutral? And that doesn't mean that they don't own our suppliers or owned by suppliers, but will they allow the fair and open contracting of suppliers, right? Open is a big word, transparent. So then you start getting into, well, I want to work with you in partnership, me being the client, in determining who these suppliers are. I want to understand the financial terms. And the thing that's really important to a global mobility manager is in many cases now you're spending your employees' money. You're not spending the company's money, right? If you're a company and you're doing a lump sum, that lump sum's probably going to stay the same regardless of what those supplier costs look like. So now you're outsourcing to an RMC, you're paying the employee a lump sum, and that RMC is not providing the best value to that transferee. You're actually spending the employee's money at that point. And I think that a lot of people in this profession don't necessarily realize that. They're not aware of it.
We've only got a few minutes left. I want to get onto a different topic for the last few minutes. Is people want to transform their mobility programs. But what is the biggest barrier? I mean, what are the barriers that people face when they want to actually change? And, we did actually do a survey on this. I won't show the results yet, but some of the things we talked about was fear of change, lack of tech integration, supplier resistance, or getting the buy-in of stakeholders. What's your view? I mean, what are the barriers that you're seeing to help somebody transform their mobility program?
I think number one, it's the fear of change. I think that a lot of people within our profession are very risk adverse. And I think the idea of blowing up a program, disrupting a program is foreign to them. It's not something that they're necessarily going to get excited about. I also think that in a lot of times when we think about transforming a mobility program, the first thing that comes to mind is increasing the benefits that are available to an employee. Your organization is going to set the guidelines of what a company is going to invest in mobility or relocation. That's going to be established at some point. It's up to the mobility managers or professionals to help guide them on what that number is. But then once you've achieved a budget or once you've achieved a
Oh, I think we've lost Chris. So we're going to just pull up. Karen has made the point. We've lost Chris. I'm not sure what's happened there, but we're getting the show. Karen says, we know that RMCs are under significant cost pressure due to changing models. I'm curious about Chris's perspective on the future of traditional RMCs. I'm going to take that one until we get Chris back. Chris, you're back. So Karen was asking, what's the future of traditional RMCs? And we've only got about a minute or so left. But what do you think the future is?
If you look at the birth of our industry, Karen, it started with tax protected home sale programs, at least from a relocation mobility standpoint, back in the 70s, right? It was executive relocation is what the industry was really built to do. It transformed over the years to outsourcing. In my opinion, I think you're going to see certain RMCs gravitate back to executive real estate related relocation programs. And I think you're going to have new players emerge into the market that are more tech savvy, more tech enabled, more supplier agnostic, more transparent with the pricing models. I think you're going to see a gravitation. And if the RMCs don't go that way, I think you're going to see some more consolidation.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that. And in fact, what I would say is there's a saying I remember once, it was actually aimed at another sector, I think it applies equally to ours, which is go large, go niche, or go bust. And I think that's going to be the challenge. I think the biggest RMCs with the strong reputations, they are going to be strong and with us forever. I think the people who've got a really cool niche, and everybody knows that that's what there is, whether their niche is being concierge or a particular industry sector, I think they'll do just fine too. But the mid-tier, the people that haven't got a particular niche and aren't the biggest gorillas on the market, I think it may be challenging for them. Anyway, we're pretty much out of time. I just want to say once again that Chris's book, Unpacking Employee Relocation, is available on Amazon. It's a great, great book. I'm going to bring Julia Onslow-Cole back onto the stage, and we're going to end the show really by just saying thank you to all our guests, and we are back next week. So meanwhile, everybody, Have a great week, and we've got an amazing show lined up for you next week with a case study of global mobility at LSEG, the London Stock Exchange Group. So everybody, have a great week. We are back next week. Take care, and many thanks to Julia, and especially to our special guest Chris Kline. Take care. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.